Hello everyone, this is Karam Singh and I am going to be talking about the Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand. So, today our learning objectives will be the language and philosophy of the Maori people and their main beliefs and the religion and the practices, their cultural practices, and the major historic events that took place in the Maori history, and the similarities between Maori and other native cultures from around the world, especially the American Indians. We will be looking at the similarities between these both native cultures. So, when we talk about the origin of the Maoris, these are the indigenous Polynesian tribes. So that came to New Zealand during 1320s to 1350s. So due to the isolation for several years, this tribe developed their own language, mythology, crafts, and culture, which were distinct from other Eastern Polynesians, but still there are words that are still similar to the Polynesian language, which shows that the roots of the Maori people are uh, related to the Polynesians. Uh, they came, as I just told, they came to New Zealand approximately 1300 to 1500s. So, and this period was called the Archaic or the colonization period. Mm, and other major event uh, took place was when the Europeans was involved. So Europeans first visited during mid 17th century. Abel Tasman was the first European in New Zealand who arrived in 1642 and followed by two others. The the initial contact of European the initial contact of European and Maoris were not a peaceful meeting. Four people of Tasman and Maori were killed. Cook's men executed 8 Maoris in the first 3 days. However, uh, ended up in a good relationship. But after a few years, there was again a conflict between Maori and Christian missionaries, Europeans, and American sealers. That was called a Boyd massacre. So during the early 19th century, Europeans had started settling in New Zealand and they shared their culture with Maoris. Maori respect and give value to Europeans and they call them Pakeha, which means the white New Zealanders. Mm, So, coming next to the language and philosophy, New Zealand was one of the last of the Polynesian islands to be settled, and at that time, the Maori language was set up, which was totally independent of Polynesian language. European Christian missionaries play the key role in Maori language uplifting. So, they helped in uh, developing the Maori language as a written language. So the first, very first material in Maori was printed in 1815 with the help of Christian missionaries. There are 5 vowels and 10 consonants in the Maori language. So, and Maori philosophy is considered philosophy is considered as a central plank of Maori tribe. They worship nature, the sky, the earth, the forests are their gods. because they are life-giving and life-sustaining forces, very similar to American Indian ideology. Uh, and next, when we talk about sports, Kyorahi and Tapawi are the two famous ball sports which were originated by Maori tribe, and Maoris also participate in rugby. They have uh, different rugby union, rugby league, and netball teams. And they also participate in Olympics. They participate in all levels, including states, national, and at international level. Traditional stories of Maori believe that they originate from Polynesian culture, and many of the stories are analogous with the stories of the Pacific Ocean. So it is still a practice of many people to remove shoes for entering a meeting house, and it is considered as a sign of respect for everyone. Another ritual called Harihanga Takapau, that means purification, which is practiced when fishing to ensure that there is no tapu on the fish. Tapu in Maori is interpreted as sacred, or defined as spiritual restriction containing a strong imposition of rules and prohibitions. A person, object, or place that is tapu may not be touched, or in some cases not even approached. So the Kaupapa Maori, Kaupapa is a set of values, principles, and plans which people have agreed on as a foundation for their actions. This is very similar to the indigenous culture, because their values were also given from generation to generation. So this Kaupapa is very similar to the Native American culture. And in the religion, all things were thought of possessing a life force. Maori believe in many gods, like the god of sky, the earth, the ocean, and the god of the forest. They also believe in supreme being called Lo, same as the creator in indigenous culture, in the American indigenous philosophy. Uh, they also have a supreme being called Lo. Because of the European impact, Christianity or belief system were also practiced by Maori. Other belief systems are also practiced there. So Maori Coop was the first to reach New Zealand. So according to Maori saying, Coop uses the star and ocean current to venture across the Pacific Ocean on his waka Harua, from his homeland Polynesian to Hawaii. More tribal waka Harua followed the path of Coop over a few centuries and landed at various parts of New Zealand. In the European time, warfare was common, so Maori warriors constructed fortified villages in a strategic location with a series of stockades and trenches which protect the inhabitants from intruders. Maori warriors were strong and fearless, and they have skills to use various traditional weapons. Those weapons can still be seen in some Maori ceremonies and in museums. And next comes the rat bone theory. Uh, this is the Pacific, called the Pacific rat. The Pacific rat, known to Maoris Kior, it was expected to have arrived with the humans on board. So in the mid 1990s, a scientist radiocarbon dated Pacific rat bones excavated from caves in both North and South Islands, and come up with dates as early as 50 to 150 CE. historic event that changed Maori. The first one is the Language Act. Since the Maori Language Act of 1987, it has been one of the two official languages of New Zealand. Another thing is the Maori people did not have any written language until the European settlers arrived. So they passed the cultural beliefs generation to generation only, which is which I already talked about, is similar to the First Nations in Canada. Next is the similarities between Maori and others. The Maori are obviously Polynesian cultures. They are related to the Polynesian culture because that is their root. And beside the Polynesian culture, the belief systems, Maori ways of knowing are also somewhat similar to other indigenous nations from other side of the world, like First Nation. Maori belief of sacred spirit tapu is similar to belief of American Indian culture that everything has spirit and should be respected. I mean, when Indians hunted, they were very careful. They did not overhunt. They did not over harvest anything. So they were careful about what they do. So they were careful that do not over harvest a crop, so the life dependent on that crop does not get disturbed. Other thing is the other similarity is Maori respect the respect and worship nature, whereas in other native cultures such as American Indian culture, 85% of people consider environmental protection is more important than economic growth. So the Maori people also believe that the spirit of their ancestors could be called upon to help them in times of need and war, which I find similar to indigenous culture. In the same way as Indians seek visions, they go to place away from people, and they fast there and pray and ask for the help of grandfather spirit until they get a vision. To sum up, Maori people are close to nature and spirituality. They were great warriors as any other native people. They have also struggled and still struggling for their rights as American Indians, or as most of the native cultures being dominated by others. Thank you for your time.